Khan, Executive Vice President of the Planned Development Corporation. Together, we'll be looking at our area's economic climate and its impact on the community. In our program today, we want to deal with local economic issues, and it appears to me that Miami is a city with a split personality. Some people, some residents are saying that growth will take care of all of our problems, that what we need is to be an economic international center, and that growth will actually take care of all of these problems that we're now having. Others are saying exactly the opposite, that it is precisely those assets that we count on, geography and population, that are creating our problems. Which view do you think that will prevail in the future, Willie?
I don't think geography and population is a problem, but I do believe that the growth that should be controlled and should be planned. Because if you do not control and you do not plan for this growth, you will have problems like we have right now.
Well, what do you propose to do?
Well, it's a mixture. You can have the control growth, and especially in economic, the downtown area. You had 3 years ago the boom taking place in downtown. People planned for that present. They didn't look at 5 years or what would happen if the source of market that they were taking advantage of at that time was stopped. That was the tours, which is essentially what happened today.
Larry, are you pessimistic or optimistic about the future economic growth of Miami?
I'm extremely optimistic. I think that we need to remember growth does a lot of things for the community. A dynamic community creates a lot of new jobs. You have to have construction jobs, you have to have service jobs, all sorts of jobs throughout the community. That provides an employment base that alleviates a lot of the pressures which have built up in our community in past years. Willie, I think, made a very good point, though, that you have to manage the growth and develop the infrastructure in terms of roads, waters and sewers, schools, and all of those sorts of things, which can support the growth.
Yeah, well, what do you say to people who say that our geographic location is the reason behind the drug traffic, and that why more population if all the population that we're getting are refugees? What do you say to those people, Eloy?
Well, what I'd like to say is that there's no way we can stop growth in Miami. Miami is, the next 10 years are going to be very important to the well-being of every Miamian. I think that we don't have the key solutions to stop the growth in Miami. And we're going to, I think I'm calling for an alarm to try to look for a solution to try to control the growth.
Well, some people say that this area is much better off than the rest of the country. You're in banking, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, isn't it true that much of the money in the banks is really drug-related money? Maybe that's part of our growth.
Well, as a banker, I don't like to admit that, but there is a fact that part of our economic growth has been some kind of a drug money. Mainly has been the investments that have been brought from South America and Canada and Europe. To give you a breakdown, 60% of all the investments in Dade County are from South Americans, and 30% from the Canadians and 10% from Europeans. So it shows you the tremendous influx of...
Well, let's deal with that issue. Willie, this money coming from South America, these investments coming from South America, are they generating jobs? Is that being put into a manufacturing industry, for example, or is this just tourist money?
There's all kinds of investment coming from South America. You have the tourists who come shopping. At the same time, you got the people that are trying to get the money out of the country because the country have political and economic problems. And they can perceive the problem coming, so they want to take the money out and invest it here.
But isn't that a shaky foundation, though? I mean, what happens if its stability comes back to that country? Won't that money go back there?
That's one of the problems. That's why I'd say you need to plan ahead. You have a lot of the Venezuelans that were investing here about 3 or 4 years ago. You had some of the Mexicans investing here. That has been stopped. But I think, in a way, that a lot of will stay here. They will not go back.
Well, who's putting money here in Miami today from South America? Which country?
From South America, you have a lot of people from Venezuela putting money in here. At the same time, you had people from Argentina way back, and you have people from Salvador that came here. But you also have a lot of European money coming to here.
Well, what kind of what form does that take? Does that take money in the bank?
Mainly development. It's taking form in different forms. Depends on the business the people in. A lot of them are being used as investors. A lot of them are being in development business. Here, they can tell us about it. I was just talking about it yesterday to some people in the construction business, and they told me about Venezuelans getting into the construction business, getting the license in here, and establish themselves in here.
Well, Larry, you're in development. Is that money going into development, say, of Brickell Avenue or some other developments?
That money really spans the entire spectrum. In fact, I was talking earlier this week with Charles Kimball, who's the real estate economist for the Miami Herald. And Charles was telling me, interestingly enough, that 40 to 50% of the sales of properties in excess of $300,000, that's your major commercial properties, acreage sales, in the past 3 years was foreign money. And of course, the large preponderance of that money is from Latin America. That's a two-edged sword. It's great if you happen to be a property owner selling, but because these people tend to pay top dollar, it's also a very inflationary, it contributes to the inflation in the community because it bids up the prices of land.
Well, what kind of benefits is Joe Blow out on the street getting out of this? What you're saying is that it might be damaging to him.
Well, in some ways it can. It certainly increases the cost of housing. When you have that foreign money bidding for condominiums, it tends to inflate those. When it pays high prices for acreage, that certainly increases the land cost, which is a part of the price of any home. So definitely it does have that
Eloy,
effect.
another complaint that we hear is that these foreign banks that operate in Miami, much of that money is sent back to their home countries, to where the main bank is, and the price of the loan has to go up because they have less money to lend. Is there any credibility to this?
Yeah, that's true. As you know, there's 67 AJAC banks, the banks that are from different states and from out of the countries, and they're operating in Miami. You have, right now, you have 2 authorized savings and loan, which open the international banking facility, and 3 commercial banks. What it tells you is that these new IBF, they can't attract the money from Miami, but they have to invest it overseas. So that shows you, that even though we have the banks here, the money's being lent out to overseas.
But what about, can you as a banker go, say, to Peru and open a bank there? Is that possible, or Spain or another country that has banks in the United States?
Yeah, I think so. Well, you seen the growth of, like, the Chase Manhattan Bank and the Bank of America, they're spread out throughout the world.
So there's no discrimination against American banks in those countries?
No, at all. As a matter of fact, I believe the tremendous growth of the American institution throughout the world has been one of the key aids to the development of some of the, which are our competitors today.
Okay, Willie, how is the small businessman making it today in downtown Miami?
Well, the small business is very tough, but at the same time, you have to realize that, like you said, there's things that happen with growth. About 3 or 4 years ago, you had a lot of people coming to downtown because there was a bonanza. I mean, the tourists was coming in, and with one sale, you could do enough sale for the whole week, create enough revenues for the whole week. A lot of people took advantage of this and settled business. People that were not experienced in marketing and planning for 5 years. Although there's a lot of stores that have problems, and some of the sales went down, especially in the tourism went down as 25%, you still have stores that you go by and they're busy all the time. The reason being, they've been in downtown for 20 years, 15 years, 30 years. They know their marketing, they know their strategy, they study, and they did the homework.
Well, what are the other people? What are the other people doing about?
What's going to happen is very simple, Julio. Those people that just established themselves 2 or 3 years ago, they're not really aware of the business. They're going to be going out of business, especially a lot of the small businessmen.
Well, isn't there any alternative strategy, such as trying to attract the business from Dade County?
Well, one of the things what we're trying to do, and the NBA is working on creating, we have an existing trap to do at night. Where do we go? They have to go to some other place, in the beach and so on.
Well,
so
the
we're
question,
working on
though,
creating that.
Is downtown safe at night?
It is safe at night. We're working with the police, very close with the police, and if you check the statistics, downtown is one of the safest places there is right now in Miami. The biggest problem that you have is the perception in people's mind, and that is taking place all over Dade County. I mean, people are afraid to go out at night. We have to do away with that perception.
I see. Let me ask you this now. Is tourism still the bread and butter of this area? Eloy?
I will say that I believe 50% of the tourists is the 50% of the tourists is I'm sorry, I got it wrong. 50% of the people, tourism is 50% of the income of Dade County. The rest being construction and small manufacturing.
Well, one of the fledgling industries in Dade County has been the filming industry. And recently we've had an incident, should we call it the Scarface Incident, though? How do you feel that this incident will reflect on the continuous growth if any, of the film industry here? Will it impact on it, Larry?
Well, it certainly was a major issue in the newspapers in the last couple of weeks, but I think its long-term impact would be very limited. You know, a lot of people were worried about our image suffering, but I think back to the French Connection, which was also about drug importing in New York City, and I tend to doubt that that really had any real impact on New York City's growth and development.
Well, what about you, Willie? What kind of response do you have?
Let me tell you, I'd love to be the producer of that movie. I don't know if he did it on purpose, because I think the movie's going to be a sellout because of all the advertising and all the promotion that I received throughout the United States. I don't think the movie's going to affect us at all. We worked very closely with the producer. We talked to him. And I think the film industry is coming to Florida. We have better climate. We got more resources. And at the same time, in the past, what kept the film industry from Florida is with the culture. They say we didn't have enough culture in here, actors and so on. Right now we do. We have all the assets here.
Well, I gather from what you're saying that the plot itself does not offend you. What about you, Eloy?
No, I disagree really 100%. I think an example is the movie made in Chile, where they put the Chilean government as being a dictatorship and mass killing. And every time you talk to somebody about Chile, they think you have a tremendous killer down in Chile, and this is not the truth. And I'm afraid that a lot of people which are not up to par and read what's happening down here in Dade County are going to feel that Miami is a bad place to come. So I think it's going to be damaging to the community.
Well, what about, though, let's say Commissioner Perez and people who backed him up, what about the impression that was created in the Anglo and the black communities about the Latins? Don't you think that the Latin image suffered?
Oh, I think so. But at the same time, it gave us an idea that how powerful the Latin community is, in the sense that they can, at the same time, stop in the movie, but they have made some concession from the producer, where they will make some changes to the plot of the movie.
Julio,
okay, Larry, as an Anglo, how do you feel about this?
You know, when you say as an Anglo, I prefer to think of myself as a businessman, because whatever the economic consequences are, pro or con, it's going to affect all of us in the business community. I don't think they're going to be very far-reaching. I think probably we did more harm by raising the issue and bringing the attention to it now than the movie would ever do.
We have to take a short break here. We'll be right back. Make a point. Go ahead.
Well, Julio, there was a group of Cubans that were talking to the producers, and they were trying to put the input into giving the work as a consultant, and so it could not be that offensive to the people. At the same time, we have to understand that I think what happened, the whole deal with Demetrio and the producer, was a misunderstanding on the lack of communication between the two. I think Demetrio simply what he wanted was to see the script and see what it was like and how much it was going to affect Miami as a whole. And the problem was that instead of communicating with each other, they went to a third party who unfortunately happens to be the press, and I think they exaggerate a little bit.
So what you're saying is the incident is closed, and in the film industry in Miami is not going to be hurt?
I don't think it's going to be hurt at all. I think, on the contrary, they're going to be such a sellout that they're going to be coming back here.
Well, let's get into another economic issue, the issue of professional sports. How important do you all feel that professional sports is for this area? Larry?
I think professional sports is very important to a town of Miami's size and Miami's vibrancy. The only problem I have right now is when you talk about building a multi-million-dollar new stadium right in the middle of one of the worst recessions this area has ever felt, I'm not sure the timing is right.
So what you're saying is the sports are right, but let's not build a new stadium. Isn't that a contradiction?
No, what I'm really saying is sports are great. This may not be the year for the new stadium. I'd like to see a new stadium.
Look at the benefits. Aren't you in construction, and a lot of other people are in there as well, and they like to see development going on, and maybe around the stadium further development will take place. Isn't that helpful to the economy?
Certainly there's a benefit, but if you look through the business community, a lot of small business people are experiencing layoffs, cutbacks, they're making sacrifices. And here we come, or here comes the Sports Authority, and we say, now, we know you're making sacrifices, but we want you to spend, because that's what this tax really is. All of us are paying for it. We want you to spend some money to create this new stadium this year. My point is, we need a new stadium. It's right for Miami, but I think maybe we ought to wait until the economy improves.
So you're for planned growth. What about you, Eloy?
Well, as you know, I've always been involved in sports, and My thinking is that we ought to start building new facilities. And I agree with Larry. I don't think we ought to go in a big stadium right now because, as you know, I think 95% of all these stadiums in the nation are losing money. The big loser has to be subsidized by the city governments. But I do think that Miami has to start building the facilities so by the year 1990, maybe we can have an Olympic Games down here. I think it will be very beneficial, have the Pan American Games, the Central American Games, some of these nice games that are held by some other countries, and maybe we can bring them down to Miami.
Well, it seems to me you're explaining a tremendous amount of benefits that we could have, and yet you're saying this is not the time to build it. There's a contradiction there as well.
Well, my contradiction is not a contradiction. I don't think we are going to a big stadium. I think we are to increase the facilities like in track and field, the facility like in swimming pool, like in equestrian. Try to diversify and get away just from football. Try to diversify our sports capacity so we can hold some of these games in the future. But I'm against 100% of having a stadium right now when the economy the way it is. And I agree with Larry 100%.
Well, Willie, you are a former member of the Little Havana Development Authority, and I would just predict that you may not be too favorable in changing the Orange Bowl and putting it someplace else or building the same someplace else.
By no means. First of all, I believe that the Orange Bowl has been in Miami for 50 years. I think the renovation of the Orange Bowl to put it up to date is only about $30 million. At the same time, all the promotion and publicity that we got through the years of using the Orange Bowl will be thrown away. At the same time, I'm a great believer that as South Florida Sports Authority, it's going to take away from us because I got so much faith in South Florida that I believe there will come a time when we'll be able to have 2-3 football teams right in here like they have in the West Coast. With Miami will be able to have his own football team, baseball team, and Lauderdale, Broward will be able to have the same thing.
But it seems to me that you neither want to have your cake nor don't you want to eat it. You don't want to build a stadium, you don't want to have it here, you don't want to have it now, and yet you're saying that we're going to have teams down here. Is the Orange Bowl going to be capable of handling all of this?
I think so. I think the Orange Bowl, if you look at the last plans, you can renovate it to put it up to date, to the needs of today.
Well, what are the benefits of a professional team coming down? Say baseball, for example. There's a lot of Latins in town, and a lot of other people like baseball as well. What are the benefits that we could get in having a team down here?
I believe it will bring, first of all, bring a lot of revenues. And bring a professional team in here, millions of dollars that goes with the payroll, the increase. It's going to create jobs. But above all, most important for us, because I'm also a great believer in the tourist industry in South Florida, is the promotion that we get. Can you imagine in January when people are playing football?
Well, how can we bring a team down here if we have no stadium, Larry? How do you answer that?
Well, we have a football team. More important is, in my mind, ensuring that we keep that football team. As I said, if we commit to build a stadium, it doesn't mean we have to commit this year. Now, I know the state legislature has given us the option of levying the 1 cent extra sales tax this year. But why can't they do that 2 years from now when the time is right, when the economy's right?
Well,
I just don't say we have to build now or never.
What certainty do we have that the Dolphins are going to stay in town? Mr. Roby has said that it's either a new stadium in some reasonable period of time, or he might consider going someplace else. Isn't there a danger that the Dolphins might go someplace else?
Well, I think it's a chance we're going to have to take, and I think Mr. Roby can wait a couple of years, like Larry suggested, until the economy of this great county is well enough so we can afford a stadium. Now, one thing that I have been amazed for years is that we don't have a baseball stadium here. You know how Latins love baseball, and everybody's trying to bring more football teams over here, and nobody, go ahead and sponsors a baseball team, which I think will be a tremendous success in this area, because you know how much Latins love the baseball game and how many Latin Americans are in the major leagues.
Well, you're a businessman, and you are aware that Miami has had an image problem. It appears as though we are beginning to overcome that image, but has that impacted the attraction of new businesses into this area? Larry?
I think it's had a definite effect. I know that in working with the Chamber of Commerce, when we try to attract new businesses, certainly if you have a crime problem, that's something that makes it very difficult for a new business to decide to relocate here in the Miami area. Any business considering Miami has to think of how desirable it will be for their employees, and can they talk those key employees into bringing their families and settling in Miami. The answer is, I think we've made some tremendous strides, and whereas it probably had a very significant impact a couple of years ago, I think we've come a long way.
Willie?
I think we're growing. This is a problem that we've had, but I'm looking to the future, and I'm very hopeful because you have the ASTA convention coming up. For the first time, we see in the county, the city of Miami Beach working together to make the ASTA convention very successful. And this is good. This is mean that we're going forward. You also hear about centralizing the tourist advertising and promotion. And like Larry says, it's slowly, but I will be there. I think it hurt us in the past, but in the future, people want to come down here.
Well, you mentioned the city of Miami Beach. That's another city in conflict. You know, it's for years it's tried to redevelop, or it's been talking about having a redevelopment plan, yet many of its senior citizens are opposed to it. What do you think should happen in Miami Beach? Should they go ahead with the redevelopment plan? Should they go with a piecemeal development? You know, they have a moratorium now. Which is the way that Miami Beach ought to go? Eloy?
Oh, as you know, I take issue 100%. And in this case, I'm 100% for the redevelopment of especially South Beach. If we continue with the way it is right now, that the place over there is becoming very dangerous, it's becoming very old, dangerous to live, and I think the future of Miami Beach depends on the redevelopment of the South Beach area in the city of Miami Beach. I think it's a key importance to the tourism in the future.
Yeah, but let's take a look at the other side. Suppose that you're a senior citizen that saved your money for years on end, trying to move to an area where you can enjoy your last few years, and all of a sudden you're uprooted, you're sent God knows where. What's going to happen to those senior citizens, Willie?
Well, I think a lot of those senior students have a lot of problems with the way the situation is right now. South Beach has deteriorated quite a bit. Here's where it comes to your planning grill. You can have the redevelopment, but at the same time you can go to private enterprise and says, fine, we're going to let you redevelop the area. We're going to give you some incentive. We're going to give you some conditional use, but you have to provide housing, mixed housing for the senior citizens. I think there's a solution. There's a way to do it.
Well, what kind of business activity do you foresee that is taking place that is actually going to draw us out of these problems that we have? In what kinds of business activities would you like to see? More banking, more industry? What kind of business activity, Larry, do you think that we should have forthcoming here?
I think it's important that whatever business activity we try to attract, that it be compatible with our environment. You mentioned at the beginning of the show that we don't
such as, give us some examples.
Well, such as non-polluting industries, electronics firms. Banks are great. Banks tend to draw attorneys and accountants, which come in. Many New York firms have opened offices here, mainly because Miami is emerging as a financial center. I think the type of business we want to attract, and we need to be very careful, though, is light industry. Distribution, as I said, electronics manufacturing, but most importantly, non-polluting.
Well, how can we go about attracting the kind of industry that we want to attract and not the ones that we don't want to, Eloy?
Well, that's very hard to do. But if you look at the last report that Mr. Charles Kimball, that Larry mentioned a while ago, the tremendous purchase of land that has taken place in the county the last 3 years is going to show you the tremendous growth that is going to take place in the building industry, especially in the housing industry, until 1985. He was a little pessimistic. He thinks by 1995 we're going to have a tremendous recession here. It's going to be very bad to the county. So to a certain extent, I think we ought to be cautious as bankers and as businessmen to make sure we control our growth.
I see. Well, is economic growth the cure-all? We're going back to the original question of the program. Is economic growth the thing that is going to pull us out of any recession that might come up, going to cure all of our problems and all of our ills? Willie?
I think it is. It will solve most of the problem because a lot of the problems that we have in employment, housing, you can solve with money. If you have revenues in the cities and the county, have enough revenues that can cure a lot of those problems.
Well, let's take a look at the economy in Dade County for the next, say, 18 months. What's going to happen in the next 18 months? Are we going to pull out of a recession? Are we going to go deeper into it? What's going to happen, Larry?
You're asking me
in
to
your area, say
the
development,
crystal ball.
construction, right?
In construction, I don't see an immediate turnaround. The construction industry is so dependent on interest rates, as you probably know, and I'm sure Eloy knows. Short-term interest rates have fallen dramatically in the past few weeks, but long-term interest rates have been much more slow to come down. They've come down very slowly. In our industry, until those rates get down, I think you're going to see a slow recovery.
Well, let's go into banking. What's going to happen in banking in the next 18 months?
Well, I think, as every banker knows, deposits have really slowed down, and we having the problem that interest rate was still very high, and they have taken especially in the capital markets, which are mortgages and bonds, rate has come down very slow. So that, therefore, has affected the construction industry. Now, the good sign is that the prime rate, which is in the money market side, is coming down pretty fast and is stimulating the businesses. I think once the prime rate is down, that gives an incentive to the businessman to borrow money, expand, and purchase new goods and create, kind of give them an incentive to really go ahead and put the business around.
Is the small businessman going to make it, Willie?
I think they're going to make it. They're going to change some of the marketing strategies, some of the way they do it, but they're going to make it. I'm very optimistic.
Well, I'm happy that we're optimistic. That's all our time for today. Thank you for being with me, and thank you for watching. That's our Tiempos for this week. As always, if you have any comments about our program, send them to Tiempos, in care of Channel 4, 316 North Miami Avenue, Miami, 331...
Federal. Conózcalo. Mi nombre es Eloy Cepero, presidente del Metropolitan Federal Savings, y Bárbara Hyde, vicepresidenta ejecutiva, para invitarlos a que conozcan nuestra nueva institución bancaria, donde les ofrecemos cuentas de cheque, ahorros y certificados de depósito de lunes a sábado.
Cambie para lo mejor. Metropolitan Federal Savings, 1291 West, 49 Calle, Hialeah. Les esperamos. Hola, este es el nuevo edificio del Metropolitan Federal. ¿Cansado de esperar?
Cambie para un banco donde no hay líneas de espera, donde tenemos servicio de drive-in y abrimos de lunes a sábado. Tenemos cuentas de cheque, ahorro y certificados de depósito.
Cambie para lo mejor. Metropolitan Federal Savings, 1291 West, 49 Calle, Hialeah. Les esperamos.
Probably know, and I'm sure Eloy knows, short-term interest rates have fallen dramatically in the past few weeks, but long-term interest rates have been much more slow to come down. They've come down very slowly. In our industry, until those rates get down, I think you're going to see a slow recovery.
Well, let's go into banking. What's going to happen in banking in the next 18 months?
Well, I think, as every banker knows, deposits have really slowed down, and we haven't the problem that interest rate was still very high, and they have taken especially in the capital markets, which are mortgages and bonds, rate has come down very slow. So that, therefore, has affected the construction industry. Now, the good sign is that the prime rate, which is in the money market side, is coming down pretty fast and is stimulating the businesses. I think once the prime rate is down, that gives an incentive to the businessman to borrow money, expand, and purchase new goods and create, kind of give them an incentive to really go ahead and put the business around.
Is the small businessman going to make it, Willie?
I think they're going to make it. They're going to change some of the marketing strategies, some of the way they do it, but they're going to make it. I'm very optimistic.
Well, I'm happy that we're optimistic. That's all our time for today. Thank you for being with me, and thank you for watching. That's our Tiempos for this week. As always, if you have any comments about our program, send them to Tiempos, in care of Channel 4, 316 North Miami Avenue, Miami, 33128. Next week on Tiempos, we'll be looking at a number of issues related to our area's refugee influx. Until then, this is Julio Abello wishing all of you a very good morning.